I'm Nancy Love of App State's Department of Government and Justice Studies. Welcome to The Academics. I'm joined each week by Michael Wade of the History Department, Paul Gates of the Department of Communication, and Lee Dunstan of App State's Walker College of Business. First topic today, Michael Trump was in the news again this week with comments about pumping breast milk, Hillary Clinton's email controversy, and a staffer who was seemingly uninformed about marital rape laws. Other candidates, including Mike Huckabee, also made outrageous comments, which I will let others report. It seems time to ask, though, a more serious question. Where do we draw the line between entertainment and politics? And Paul, can you get us started on that?
I'm not sure there is a line anymore. I think they're almost becoming synonymous. I mean, now Huckabee has joined the hysterical side of things. His comment, the most recent thing he said about the Iran deal being tantamount to marching the Israelis to the ovens, is just beyond the pale. I mean, this is getting out of hand. It's been out of hand for a while, but it's spreading.
Politics as entertainment, and to some extent, I think politics, rightfully, has always been entertaining. I mean, if we want to go back to some of the halcyon days of our politics as we remember it historically, you could look at the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And those debates drew hundreds, sometimes even thousands of people to hear Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln argue the issues of the day in the most intellectually high-level way. However, when you have a celebrity who is a very canny, smart, savvy celebrity who also happens to be a billionaire running, look out. Because now it's all entertainment all the time. And the talk shows can't get enough of it. They love it. It just is jacking up their ratings. And so I don't know if it does us a lot of good to spend our time worrying about it. We're going to have to figure out how we're going to deal with it as a fact of life, because it is a fact of life.
Well, it is that, and that's the reason we ought to worry about it.
Well stated, Mike.
We live in a culture of illusions. Consider this. TV deals in electronic images and pseudo-events. They're manufactured events. And the content of electronic media is determined by media corporations. The average American watches 4 hours of television a day. That's 2 months a year equivalent, and has watched over 9 years of television by the time he or she is 65. Consider additionally that advertisers, an important part of television, have determined the average American adult's mental age to be around 14. Add to that failing schools, diminished reading, and no wonder the Republic has largely vanished. I wonder what it is we're celebrating on the 4th of July, or if we ever wonder about the state of the Republic when the Pledge of Allegiance is recited. We got a big problem. And doubters should note that there exists abundant evidence that this is true. The Donald is simply the latest rage.
I would take issue with that.
I'm stunned.
Yeah. Well, the Affordable Care Act is now law, and it is succeeding. There are a number of things that have happened in the last 8 years that I think, whether you like the Obama administration or hate the Obama administration, it is clear that it will go down as a very, very consequential administration in American history. So, and many of the things that have been accomplished, many would say are major achievements, not the least of which, of course, is the Affordable Care Act. And now arguably the crowning foreign policy achievement is going to be a deal with Iran on nuclear weapons. So I hear you as it relates to a sense of, at least a slight sense of despair about the Republic. But I think there are a lot of things to be very, very excited about on the positive side.
Are you saying, though, that the quality of our public discourse has improved?
No, I'm not. And no, please don't put me in the category of everything is great. Much needs improvement, but it is not the end of the world, and I firmly believe that. I do believe that we're making significant progress in the face of implacable opposition. And I think the reason we're making that progress is because the kind of progress we're making is mostly rational progress.
Well, I agree with that, Lee, that we are making progress, but as you describe it, in the face of implacable opposition, I think what that's doing is it's making these events, which are going in the right direction, occur by the skin of our teeth. I mean, this is, the Supreme Court has bailed out the administration on a couple of these things. If it weren't for the Supreme Court, and it's a divided court even, if it weren't for the court, we wouldn't be making progress the way we are.
Hasn't it always been thus? Haven't we always just kind of made it by the skin of our teeth and isn't the nature of this kind of form of government a kind of grinding, a constant grinding that I would submit our founding fathers kind of understood intuitively, that there would be a grinding, hopefully, toward success. Nothing is guaranteed, and we've made some huge mistakes. I mean, the one that just comes to mind off the top of my head in my lifetime is the Vietnam War. Unbelievable mistake. The second one that comes to my mind is the Iraq War. An unbelievable mistake. But the grinding seems to move upward.
But then to Mike's point too, that none of this progress is any thanks to the media, which now traffics in sound bites and has for years. That's nothing new. And people like Huckabee and Trump are all too willing to lend their sound bites to the political discourse, which moves us nowhere.
Well, I think at the end, we're still left with, we have elections. So we have one of the forms of a republic. But when you look at the quality of what's been going on, which is the sort of freak show almost at times that is television or this campaign thus far, and then you add in voters who clearly gobbled this up. Otherwise. Why would it be on television? Why would advertisers support it? I still think that I rest my case.
Well, but what is your conclusion? Is your conclusion that we're headed into the toilet?
We are headed toward a less and less democratic Republican form of government, where the big decisions are determined by when it is, insofar as it is determined by the public, by a public that has been raised for almost its entire collective life on electronic images and other manufactured events which are illusory.
Any way to turn that around?
That's another program.
Okay, well, we may well come back to it. Anyone want a final word on this?
Well, the progress that we might make, and to continue Mike's thought on the problem of the electorate, what they are being informed by. Of course, you've got to also take the next step, I think, and talk about the money that is behind the manufacturing of the images. and manufacturing of the debate and manufacturing of the issues.
Well, our next topic is also, to some extent, about media coverage, at least. Norman Podoretz, a prominent neoconservative and editor of commentary from 1965 to 1990, published a critique of the nuclear deal with Iran in the Washington Post this week. And the headline says a lot: Israel's choice, conventional war now or nuclear war later. Does this deal set the stage for a war between Israel and Iran? And perhaps a broader question, what is U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East at this point? Who are our friends? Who are our enemies? How can we tell?
Well, let me jump in on the Podoretz article. The thesis of the Podoretz article is interesting. If you read the Podoretz article, as I did, what happens is that implicit throughout the article, without ever any explication whatsoever, not one word about what is wrong with the deal with Iran, not one word. So there is implicit from the beginning, any deal with Iran is a bad deal. Any deal with Iran, no matter how verifiable, is a bad deal because the Iranians want to destroy Israel and they will do it. So, I mean, how do you argue with this kind of a thesis? The thesis is, since I have already engaged in the assumption, without discussing it, that the deal stinks, I will now go on to say that the only way to deal with it is to accept Obama's thesis that the alternative is war, yes, and I say the Israelis should immediately attack. What do you do when a thought leader inside the neocon community says, I won't discuss the merits or demerits of the deal, but what I will do is insist that there be conventional war, that the Israelis start it. Has anybody asked whether the Israelis could win a conventional war against Iran and where that leaves the world?
Right.
That leaves the world where Mr. Netanyahu and his military must go nuke in order to survive, and we're in a nuclear war almost immediately.
That last is what was on my mind. Israel's population is what, 6 million roughly? Iran's is 70 million. It's one of the top 5 oil producers in the world.
With a well-trained military.
With a well-trained military, huge distances, and he's proposing a conventional war. Well, that ought to be a stopper right there. The other is it calls to mind, you mentioned Vietnam earlier, and it calls to mind, I wouldn't say that the analogy is all that exact. Let's say that Israel were somehow to prevail, and I think that probably would include the use of nuclear weapons, and that the war did not become wider. Isn't it like destroying the village to save it? What are you left with? It can't be improved. War usually consumes the very things that people say they're fighting for: decency, justice, humanity. Boy, if you think Sarajevo was a problem, how about this one? And the prospects of engendering a much wider conflict. It's nuts.
Does it have a chance, and this could be a third topic, to restore Obama's relationship with Congress, or at least revise Obama's relationship with Congress? He's now making public appeals to people to contact their representatives and senators. Kerry testified before Congress last week. Public opinion is running against congressional approval of the deal. What can Obama do?
Well, you've got the Israel lobby, which I think I take some heart from the fact that they're not all on the same page in the United States, and that there are misgivings. And I think we've got some American Jews who are thinking of themselves as Americans first, and perhaps Jews second. And that's a heartening turn of events, I think. And I think that bodes well for the discussion in the next 60 days, I guess, that we're supposed to be engaged in over the deal. And maybe, perhaps, the Congress will be guided by that. And I certainly would like to see that continue.
It's a testament to some of the things that Mike has talked about how our politics is in some trouble, I think, to note that I think the Obama administration is planning that this deal with Iran will actually be accomplished through the ability to uphold a veto, not congressional approval. There will be congressional disapproval. This is going to go down almost certainly on party lines. And then the issue is, will the president, the administration, be able to get 34 senators and 2/3 of the House, or pardon me, 1/3 of the House of Representatives to uphold his veto? Because that's really the deal that was set up months ago, before this negotiation was even concluded. The deal was Obama knew this was going to go down on party lines, and Congress wanted a vote. Corker, who is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, made a deal saying, we get a vote, and you can maybe hold it onto your deal with a veto. And that's where this is headed. It's unfortunate, but that's where it's headed. And my prediction would be that they will be able to hold his veto.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's what I was trying to get at with the support of the anti-war crowd, led by the American Jewish community, which is becoming more and more split on that particular question.
What is so disheartening about this is I keep waiting to hear somebody start talking about the specifics of the agreement with the Iranians that they really feel undermines our security. Please talk about that, because there may be something there. No, this is all just it's a terrible deal. It's a path to a nuclear Middle East. It's a path to an Iranian bomb. Excuse me, all conclusionary. Where are the facts?
Well, and the American public deserves that substance. It's too important. Well, our last topic today, which is a bizarre story that would be funny if it were not so serious and so sad, is Dr. Walter Palmer, a Twin Cities dentist who is currently in hiding after killing Cecil the lion, a beloved resident of a wildlife sanctuary in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe wants now to extradite him. What are your thoughts on this?
I love the idea of Dr. Palmer in a Zimbabwean court. Being prosecuted for poaching. I don't know what their penalties for that are, but I can imagine in my mind's eye Dr. Palmer being set loose in the preserve, and we'll see what happens.
Well, he's being hunted in the Twin Cities now.
What's good for the goose, so to speak, and maybe Cecil had children.
Yeah, we got to consider the idea that this really is, poaching. This is not a sport.
Yes.
Exactly.
This there is no there is no hunting here. This is killing. I mean, this is, if Cecil had been armed, it would have been a fair fight, and I wish that were possible. But absent that, there's no defense for this kind of thing, and I too would like to not only see Dr. Palmer in a Zimbabwean court, but I'd like to see him in a Zimbabwean prison, which I think is probably where he would end up should this extradition plan come to pass. I have no idea what our extradition treaty, or if we do have one, with Zimbabwe, but it's an interesting thought to entertain how this might turn out.
Well, let me add a quick counterpoint here. It is not clear whether in my mind, yet, as much as I abhor the idea as an ethical matter that he would hunt down with a bow and arrow, wound, and then finish off this poor animal 40 hours later. But it is not clear that he did something illegal. If, in fact, he intended to take this animal as a trophy, as a part of a legitimate hunt, a legal hunt, and he was assured by these guides that that was what was happening, he may not have committed a crime. The ethics of this thing are an entirely different issue. The ethics of it are, I think, indisputable, but it is not clear to me that he committed a crime.
Well, that question turns on, did the guides know and mislead Palmer?
Right.
Or did Palmer insist
Right.
that this is how it's going, what I paid $55,000 for,
Exactly.
and I'm going to get my lion?
That's exactly right.
So we don't, that's unclear, definitely, at this point. Yep.
Two things. He who pays the money calls the shots. No pun intended.
Literally.
And if the punishment is to fit the crime in some way other than the rather draconian way I first described it, I think this man's guilty. But what that's for a court to decide. Hopefully, if he's convicted, have him become the resident dentist for the wildlife refuge, or some such penalty where he can use such skills as he has, other than hunting skills, to do some good gratis.
Is this an opportunity, do you think, for us to raise larger issues about protecting endangered species? Not that lions are endangered yet, but there are also problems with poaching ivory. Gorillas are struggling in Kenya in preserves.
Well, that argues for something really draconian to take place out of this, because the anti-poaching movement needs all the help it can get at this point. If as a lot of religions like to say, particularly the Christian religion here in the United States, all creatures are God's creatures, then there's there's a real moral issue there. Why are we killing off so much of the life that is with us on Earth?
Well, as I seem to be talking a lot about this today, it's the money. When you bring the ivory trade is completely driven by foreign commercial interests, not hunters, but manufacturers and so forth that sell products made from elephant tusks, and it's the market that drives that activity.
Elephant tusks, rhinoceros horns, bear bile ducts, on and on.
Right.
Any last thoughts on the money for today?
Well, how do you take the money out of the equation? I mean, as long as there is a demand, and that's back to, I think, Mike's moral issue. Why is there a demand? If you get that under control, perhaps there's something you could do about the market that's created and the money that flows back and forth from in that market.
In a world that has Cialis and Viagra and God knows what else, why do we need continue to need rhinoceros horns? Why?
Better living through chemistry. You know? We don't need natural products.
Well, you need to talk to a rich Chinese fellow who's paying enormous sums of money for rhinoceros horn powder. And he might be able to tell you with a big smile on his face.
Are we off the air now?
No, but I think we do need to close. That's our program for this week. And you can reach us with your questions and comments at watchapptv.com. Please join us again next week. I'm Nancy Love for the Academics. Thank you.
And here's why, good sir. You get bang for the buck.